Welcome back to Lead Yourself First, the Conscious Leadership Blueprint. Today, we're going to talk about the three brains: the genius, the caveman, and the robot. Your brain on leadership. I'm Dr. Kevin Mays, excited to be here with you today to uncover and unlock your potential, uncover some best practices, and help you position yourself to become a truly elite executive, to become an uncommon leader that leads yourself first and that makes others better. A leader that, like a stone thrown in a pond, ripples out across the organization with a positive impact that creates a culture that's solid, that's strong, that's engaging, and that's magnetic, that attracts the top talent into your organization. It all starts when you lead yourself first. Now, the content we're going to talk about today comes directly out of the new book, Lead Yourself First, the High Achiever's Guide to Upgrade Your Leadership. Simply go to upgradeyourleadership.com, purchase your copy today. In it, you will find a depth of information to help you become more self-aware as a leader, because it's from a place of self-awareness that you're in a true position of choice, that you're in a position to access your genius brain. Without awareness, there is no choice. Without awareness, robot brain wins every time. Without awareness, you will continually combat caveman brain. With awareness, you're in a position to lead yourself first and to become the true leader that is possible. So please follow, please subscribe, and pay attention as we move forward on the pathway to conscious leadership as you lead yourself first. Now, as I alluded to, there are three brains within. And if you watch the first episode, you understand with great clarity what it looks like when the genius, the robot, or the caveman shows up. What it feels like when the genius is in charge, what it feels like when the caveman takes over. And you understand that when the caveman takes over, that internal part of our internal systems, really, our limbic system, when it takes over, what happens when we go into caveman mode? When we start to blame, when we start to make excuses, when we become defensive, when we fall into fight or flight mode, that's when the caveman is taken over. And in those moments, we do a great job in making ourselves okay and making others wrong. In those moments, we're right and they're the knucklehead. They're the idiot. However, in those moments, we are completely out of our power zone. To be in the power zone means the caveman is not in charge and the robot is not in charge. When robot brain is in charge, remember, we keep about exercising those same patterns. It's the secret to our success that when overdone becomes our Achilles heel. When it shoots us in the foot, the true way to access your power zone and to become the best version of yourself as a leader of others, a leader of your organization, a leader of your family, is to be a leader of yourself. And that starts by you accessing your genius brain, the prefrontal cortex, the executive function, right? The thing that differentiates us from animals. Now, here's the thing. It will appear to be like a switch that flips when you watch people go from being composed, being calm, being in a place where the genius is in charge. It will seem to go in an instant to suddenly they become defensive. They become reactive and recognize that when we're out of the power zone, we blame, we make excuses, and we become defensive. When we are in the power zone, we are taking 100% flawless ownership, accountability, and responsibility for ourselves, our life, and for the impact that we create in our world. OAR. You have the oar in the boat. You are rowing the direction that you want to go. You are in charge. That is being in the power zone. So remember, in the power zone, you have the oars on the boat. You're determining the direction. When caveman or robot is in charge, not so much. That's when you'll find yourself falling into this place where you'll start to blame, make excuses, or become defensive. Our work is to not only have awareness to see this happening, see it live when it happens, to notice it in others, which is much easier than noticing it in ourselves. But once you can notice it in others with a level of awareness by controlling your attention and becoming more aware, then you'll start to notice that it's not only happening in others, but every time you're frustrated by what somebody else is doing, you are slipping out of your power zone. When you become frustrated by the idiotic ways of other people, your limbic system's taking over. When you start to blame or make excuses, recognize you are the one who is not in the power zone. When I'm complaining about something that a colleague of mine is doing, I'm the one who's not in the power zone. They're just doing the best they know how to do. So understanding what is the mechanism that casts us from being in our power zone where the genius brain is in charge to the instant when the caveman or the robot take over, and recognize there is a mechanism, and it happens when we're not present and when we're not aware. Because when we're not present and we're not aware, then we're not intentional. And when we're not intentional, we're not aligned with our vision of who we want to become. In those moments, we're like a ship without a rudder. We're just floating around aimlessly, making ourselves right, making ourselves okay, defending our ego, making others wrong in a way that validates all of the patterns we've cultivated in that self-identity we've cultivated during the course of our life. But here's the thing, it doesn't get you the result you want. You must do things differently. Starts with presence and awareness. Then when you turn your attention in and you become aware with your attention, become aware of what's going on within, with your thinking, your feeling, and your behaving, you'll start to notice when caveman takes over. So here's the secret. It's never about them. 100% of the time, it's about you. And this thing that activates the caveman within comes down to one word: attachment. Oh my goodness. And here's the secret. The thing that activates that caveman within comes down to one word: attachment. As humans, we're hedonistic, right? We move towards what feels good and away from what doesn't. And what feels good is a validation of the belief set that we've created. When I see things and perceive things through my filter that validate the beliefs I'm attached to, nothing more precious than the belief being my self-concept, my ego. When things validate my ego, it releases the dopamine, gives me a positive feeling. I get a swing in my step. I feel confident. I feel cocky. I feel like I can own the world. However, that's just me being conditional. That's my satisfaction, my happiness being conditional on what I perceive. And that is not true happiness. Now, that's a conditioned state. Similarly, when I perceive things that through my perceptual filter challenge or invalidate the beliefs I'm attached to, when things invalidate my success script, my ego, in those moments, it's going to launch this cortisol injection into my bloodstream. That's the caveman brain. And without exception, when caveman brain takes over, I think differently, I feel differently, and I behave differently. But recognize it all comes back to this one lever, that is attachment. Without awareness, we move through the world with these attachments. And it's really this attachment to this cognitive framework and this worldview. The hard thing is it's invisible. It's like the glasses that you wear, you don't see the lenses, but it's there. And it focuses your world a particular way. These lenses, this cognitive framework that you've developed and have become attached to, really come back to how you programmed your software when you first came into the world. And when I talk about software, I'm talking about all the neuroprogramming that drives how you show up today. Your beliefs, your self-concepts, your mores, your values, all of this that is an offspring of the system that you grew up in. You grew up in a family system that had certain values. You played a certain role in your family. You had a certain birth order. You had a relationship with your mother or your father. Your parents split up or didn't. Either way, your grandparents were involved. You learned how to thrive in that system at a time when your brain was fresh. And every experience you had impacted how your brain wired itself. And now, all these decades later, you cling to that structure and that framework because it allowed you to not only survive, but thrive. However, now it's dictating and driving how you're showing up. And the proof is in the pudding. When things invalidate or challenge that, it's going to evoke an irritation. It's going to be the sandpaper that will grind you down, right? It's going to cause frustration. It's going to create guilt, shame, fear, irritation, anger, and rage, all of it. And all of it not based on the reality that's happening now, but based on the storehouse of beliefs that you gathered and collected and attach yourself to. The truth of the world as a leader is that you will suffer, that you will not feel pain, and understand there's a difference, because pain is just a physical sensation in your body. It's neither good nor bad. Actually, it's good because it's a warning sign. If you put your hand on a burner and your flesh is starting to melt, you want pain to tell you to move your hand from the burner. So it's a good thing, but we label it bad and we recoil against it. We don't like to feel uncomfortable. And it's in that drive of craving and aversion that we create these patterns, and we double down on these patterns and attach ourselves to these patterns that keep us from being exceptional. The truth is that when you let go, when you transcend, when you cut through these patterns, the self-concept, the worldview, and all of the beliefs that you're carrying, when you cleanse the lens of perception, reality as it is, infinite, and in that infinity, there's infinite choices, and there's infinite power that you can unleash in the world to have a positive influence. Now, recognize this, that with your thoughts, you create the world. So if you are using this power in a way that is self-serving, it's going to, in the long term, underserve you, because it's almost like being territorial. You'll start to live in a world where others are withholding, where others are not generous, where others are susceptible or skeptical. And when others are skeptical, recognize what in the outer world is merely a reflection of what's going on in the inner world. When you show up with a positive intention, when you show up with generosity, when you show up with kindness and compassion, you'll see that the world will start to reflect those qualities. When you show up as the model, when you show up not just as a hard worker, as so many leaders do, but somebody who listens and somebody who cares, you're going to watch people step forward. You're going to watch your culture elevate. So there's one thing you must do if you want to get in the driver's seat in your life, if you want to undermine those caveman moments. Remember, it starts with having presence, and presence is a mental muscle to be able to practice coming back to the here and now moment, right here, right now. To be able to practice coming back to bringing your attention back to your breath, to feel the inhalation, to feel the exhalation, to know that you are anchored in this present moment, and that your perceptions cannot cut that anchor. When you are anchored in the present moment, you can weather absolutely any storm. When you lose that anchor, you'll start to react. When you start to react, it becomes a snowball. The reaction becomes stress. The stress becomes anxiety. The anxiety becomes chronic anxiety, becomes depression, then you have to self-medicate, and you're on the roller coaster of caffeination and alcohol, right? It's this up and down roller coaster, all because we haven't developed that mental muscle of presence. So practice. This is the challenge to you. If you want to access your caveman brain, then don't develop presence if you want caveman to take over. But if you want to firmly have genius available at your disposal, that is creative problem solving. That is the ability to think clearly in chaotic situations. That is that creative force within. If you want to be able to tap that and be able to live life on your terms and lead with purpose, then you must start from a platform of presence right here, right now. In this way, you can start to cut through the suffering that is indicative of life, because suffering comes from our attachments. When things don't match our expectations, we become frustrated. But when you let go of your expectation, and I'm not saying be reckless in life, but just notice what your expectation is and let it go. It's a touch and let go, touch and go. When you let go of your expectations, then you're able to really be with reality as it is, not your idea of how it should be. And when you allow yourself to experience reality as it is, you start to step into your power zone. You start to react less. It's a form of surrender. Stepping into the power zone is a form of surrender. It requires surrender. It requires letting go. Because when you do that, then you'll find a storehouse of potential opening up within you that you didn't even know was there. When you stop being right, when you stop justifying yourself, when you stop trying to get validation from the world around you and just learn to be okay inside yourself in this moment, the world opens up. That's why leadership is an inside job, and you've got to lead from the inside out. When you do that, you set yourself up to be a truly elite executive, to live life on your terms and to create a positive, powerful impact. So remember, suffering is the nature of the world, but it comes because of our attachments to our ideas, our ego identity, our worldview, and our craving for comfort and our aversion to discomfort. Recognize the craving and aversion, the comfort and discomfort in many ways are based on not the actual experience, but it's a perception. And when things match our expectations, it creates that powerful, positive, comfortable feeling. So we crave that. We want more of that. But when things don't match our expectations or our self-concept or our value system, then it creates this negative emotion. We call it negative, but the reality is it's just an emotion. But when we call it negative, we react against it. We recoil against it because we don't like to experience it. And if you're like me, I grew up learning how to be unaware of that. Didn't mean the emotion wasn't there. I just learned to stuff it down and to become unaware of my own guilt, my own fear, my own sense of inadequacy, my own anger. I was always okay, but under the surface was a churning. And guess what would happen every once in a while? That churning would build and this pressure would come off in the form of passive aggressive behavior or downright aggressive behavior or frustration or sadness or anger or ultimately depression, right? Where part of me is just shut off and I'm not connected with my own aliveness and vitality. Because I'll tell you this, if you want to experience more high highs in your life, then you have to open the door to more low lows. But when you resist against that part of yourself that you don't like, then you open the door for the caveman to sneak in and take over. And when you just keep going through the motions, doing what you always did, you give the robot full permission to take over. There's nothing wrong with being an expert. There's nothing wrong with mastering the things in your life and becoming a true craftsman of life. The question is choice. The question is about the relationship with these parts of yourself. When you have awareness and presence and you step in and allow genius brain to take over, you begin to change the relationship with these parts of yourself. And it's not about getting rid of them, but stopping the reactivity against these parts of yourself. What part? The fear, the angst, the guilt, the shame. When you stop resisting against this stuff and just allow yourself to experience it, it's nothing more than a sensation in your body. It arises and it passes like any season of the year. However, when you resist against, what you resist persists. So why this is important as a leader is recognize your job as a leader is very different than being a high performer. A high performer is getting stuff done. A leader is creating engagement in others. That's the colloquial term. We call it engagement. I think about getting people to bring their heart to the game, getting them to want to show up, getting them to feel good about the work they're doing, getting them to be in love with work. And I hate that saying because it sounds so industrial revolution-ish. But you know what? We all want to be some part of something larger. We all want to do something meaningful. That's a human quality. And when you can unleash that in a culture where people start to feel like what they do matters, when people start to feel like they matter, when they feel like their voice is heard, even if their decisions aren't running the show, when they feel like they have a say and they have some self-agency, you're going to see them show up at a continually higher level. That's the key to success. First, unleashing your own genius, and then being able to unleash their genius. Because as you do that and get them to bring their heart to the game, get them to keep their caveman at bay, get them to interrupt the robot brain so they can truly think with a creative and critical mind in a way that's aligned with the vision, mission, and values of the organization, you unleash an unstoppable force that can create anything. In fact, there's nothing that a strong-willed group of people can accomplish in this world. Through alignment, through openness, through effective communication, when people have each other's backs. And that's what's at stake here. When we talk about the three brains, the caveman, the robot, and the genius, what's at stake is creating revolutionary change in your organization, in your family, in your life, and ultimately in the world you live. With your thoughts, you create the world. Create positive thinking patterns, project those onto others, and ignite those in others, and watch how much power you have as a leader. Now, there's a couple ways to really be able to tell when people are in that robot caveman brain. They're important to start to tune into, right? Start to notice and recognize where so often we might personalize somebody's behavior when they get sharp, condescending, when they get sarcastic. I want you to begin to recognize that as simply them falling into caveman zone. Their caveman's taking over. And the reason their caveman is taking over is not about you. It's not insubordination. It's not a statement of your ineffectiveness. It's not a challenge. While all these may be true, the reality is under the surface, they feel threatened somehow. They don't feel validated. They don't feel connected. They don't feel heard. That's what's going on. When you see individuals behaving in a way where they're raising their voice in a meeting, or they're shutting down, or they're sarcastic, or they're condescending, or passive aggressive, or they say they're going to do something, but they don't, recognize they are in caveman zone. Creating accountability is such a buzzword these days, and we do so by setting boundaries and following up, of course, but that's not enough. The real secret to unlocking the key to greater accountability is creating an environment and developing dynamics in your relationships where people bring their heart to the game. That's done not by telling, but by listening. By listening with empathy, with openness, by simply receiving and witnessing not only what they're saying, but the emotional state of the other person. This is why it's so important for you as a leader to develop a deep level of awareness within yourself, because if you don't have awareness of yourself, you won't be able to bring awareness to the relationship. You won't notice what's going on for the other person, or you'll notice it, but you'll show up in a way where you're out of your power zone. And as that neural mirroring quality happens, you'll begin to attack them. You'll blame them. You'll make excuses and they'll be at fault. You'll become defensive. Now, the real power is staying in your power zone, ownership, accountability, and responsibility within yourself, and recognizing the dynamic for what it is. Not getting hooked into it where they're elevated so you become elevated, but instead staying grounded, anchored in the present moment, breathing, witnessing them fully, and watching them slowly de-escalate as you create a deeper alignment. As you do that, their caveman is chased away, and you set the stage for them to enter into genius, to become the best version of themselves. That's leadership 101. It's leadership at its best, and that's when you unleash your leadership potential. So go to upgradeyourleadership.com. and get the book, Lead Yourself First. So excited. It's been a labor of love where we talk not only about the three brains, but about so many different models and tools for being able to develop a deep level of self-awareness that really allows you to operate with greater intentionality, equanimity, and purpose. There is an actual, these words aren't just hollow words. There's actual practices in the pathway of conscious leadership. And remember, conscious leadership is simply a 4-step path where you're developing presence, awareness, intention, and vision. Each of these 4 steps have particular practices that when you practice them, When you practice presence, when you practice awareness, when you practice intention, and when you practice vision, those four together put you on a conscious leadership pathway that will radically alter the complete trajectory of your life and your leadership. It'll change your relationships. And I know because this is the pathway I've discovered after having worked with thousands of leaders and being on my own self awareness journey. I've discovered this, and through studying great leaders, researching, and writing my doctoral dissertation on leaders who practice self awareness. This is what I found the best leaders do. The ones who are creating undeniable successful organizations, they aren't just driving results, they aren't just looking at metrics. No, they're bringing a different perspective to the game. In fact, I work with one organization where it's a foundry of all things. And the story around the industry is this one particular foundry prints money. So how is this foundry printing money? I've heard it so many times. Foundries are often salt of the earth places where individuals work hard and it's a life or death situation every day because there's molten pots of metal swinging around. So I went into this organization that I'm working with and I sat down with the executive who runs it to find out, why is this place printing money? I was blown away. This is one of the most self-aware individuals I've ever met in my life. He had a deep level of presence and self-awareness, and he spent his life on a pathway studying Jim Rohn and studying Jim Collins and studying self-awareness and being on the path to developing that presence, awareness, intention, and vision. He did it because it was his pathway. And because it was, he created a culture that was printing money. How about that? Recognize the pathway of conscious leadership is ultimately about results. When you make others better, you make your organization better. And that is a game changer. So go to Upgrade Your Leadership, get a copy of the book, and let's have a dialogue about it. Send me your perspectives, your questions, your feedback, your pushback. Love to have some dialogue. And I created this book for one purpose: to be helpful, to take some of what I've learned over the decades I've been doing this work and help others learn some of the things that it took me decades to learn and that I've been teaching and training and applying to my own business for decades. I guarantee you're going to find some uncommon wisdom in this book that will help you absolutely take your business and your thinking and your leadership years ahead. UpgradeYourLeadership.com. Please follow, subscribe, and look for us. I'm looking forward to our next conversation. Until then, lead yourself first.